And today's tutorial we're going to have a look at quite an important feature that you're going to have to tackle at some point as a 3D artist if you ever want to bring some life and attitude to your 3D characters. And quite often people will spend weeks and weeks modeling a character, but then spend very little time actually modeling the eyes. And the eyes are so important to relating emotion and giving the character far more life and depth. And so there's some very cheap and nasty ways to model up some quick eyes and just to put a straight material on a sphere. But what we're going to do in this tutorial is we're going to take a look at a time-honored technique for doing eyes in 3D that is used comprehensively by some of the bigger studios out there, namely Pixar, Dreamworks, just to name a few. And as soon as I show you some of these references I've gathered, you'll straight away you'll know exactly what the eyes that I'm talking about look like, because they are so common. And let's just have a quick look at some of the reference that I've gathered. This is the basic eye that we're going to try and tackle in this tutorial. It involves a little bit of modeling, a little bit of texturing. We'll jump into Photoshop to do a little bit of texturing. You won't need to use Photoshop. You can use any graphics package that you have, just to do some painting of some detail. And we're also going to take the time to do a very simple rig in 3D, an eye control rig, just based on a look at object, and also give the eye control rig some blink controls. So it's a fairly simple tutorial, but it's definitely one that you want to put in your 3D repertoire and have ready to use the next time you need to do some eyes for your 3D characters. And I've got a couple of other examples, and I'll just minimize this slightly. Got a couple of other examples here that we can have a look at. And there's obviously Cars from Pixar. They use this technique, and you'll see that there is a highlight in the iris section, and there's that telltale specular spot on the cornea. And as we look at some other reference here, there's another good one. Very similar technique. You see that highlight on the iris there again, and the pupil is always quite flat and black, and it doesn't really have any reflection on it at all. And then we see that nice tight highlight, specular highlight on the cornea. And Monsters Inc., they did the same again for Monsters Inc. And Sully as well, a little bit more detail on the mapping on the cornea for Sully, and not Sully, and quite a recent project, Kung Fu Panda. They used the exact same technique, and I think it's been such a well-developed technique over the years that it's sort of a bit of a mistake to stray from it, because the eyes just don't read as well. They just don't have the soul that you're looking for. And to just map it, to put a map on a sphere, you just don't get the interactivity with the lighting that's in the scene at the time. And you'll see that there's a big highlight on this eye, where there's far less highlight over here. He's squinting, there's a bit of shadow created from the eyebrows, and it's interactive. And this is a very good example of some of the expression that you can get in these same sorts of eyes. And it also has some telltale markers that we're going to try and hit with our eyes in this tutorial, namely the reflective properties, that specular highlight that's happening on the cornea. We've got another example there, and that cornea detail, we're going to try and recreate that in Photoshop. And there's another simple example there. And of course, Nemo used the exact same process to do his eyes. So we've got some good reference. Always prepare your modeling sessions, your 3D sessions with good reference. You've got to know where you're heading and be able to check are you on the right track as you go along. So we've got some good reference to refer to, some Shrek characters there, and they've used the same technique, a little bit different for the cat, given that it's got cat's eyes, but very similar in that the iris would have been projected back into the eye. We've got Incredibles, same again, and very evident down here on the baby. Okay. So we might as well get going. Our 3D character here is a character that I'm going to be using throughout a couple of tutorials that will be coming to Simply Max. At the moment he's not rigged, he's just a simple character. I'll just do a quick render and show you what he looks like. He's just a very simple character. He's a cutesy little alien child, and he doesn't have any eyes at the moment. All I've got is stand-in spheres in his eye sockets there. They're quite large, but they need to be, given that his eye sockets are actually quite large. And so we've got those stand-in spheres, and we're going to use one of those spheres as the basis of our starting model. And just before we move on, I'll just give you a quick look, because you will have this project file to work with as well. And I'll just give you a little bit of introduction to some of the elements and how it's been set up. And first of all, we'll have a look at Layer Manager. I'll just bring that up here. I've segmented things out into layers just to make life a bit easier for you. And they're fairly self-explanatory. In the body, you've got the body mesh, the two belt buckle objects, and you've also got the right and left leg and the right and left foot down the bottom here. And the set, I've just got the ground in the set, but by the time we're finished here, I'll probably have a couple of lights in the set, just to, like I've mentioned in a previous tutorial, and I'll touch on it again. If you're going to be doing any materials, especially when reflection and refraction and specularity are so crucial as they are with eyes, it's very important. It's very important to set up a good light rig, just a simple light rig that's going to give you some of those specular qualities. And that way you'll be able to read how your material is working and how it will work as you move towards a final scene. So, and what I'll do is place those. They'll end up going into the set, and any cameras I tend to put in set as well. And then he's just got some simple teeth there as well. So that's basically the layer manager and how it's laid out. And in the default, I've got the two eye proxies, which once we're finished and we've got all of the geometry for the eyes, we'll put those into a layer of their own as well. Okay, so I have got one shortcut that I'll introduce in this tutorial straight off the bat. In Max 2009, there's a great feature in the Tools section called Scene Explorer. Now, many of you would be familiar with the H shortcut key, which used to bring up the Select by Name dialog. And it's changed in visual look and feel in 2009, Max 2009. But this is the select from scene or select name from scene that has been in Max for quite some time by pressing the H button. Well, that's one way of doing things. I love this new feature, this new Scene Explorer. And the Scene Explorer gives you lots and lots of power. It's got a bunch of tick boxes, and you can right click and bring up more columns, column chooser, and you've basically got all of these different columns that you can set up a column for. Lights, you can have a column for light on, light off, shadows on, shadows off, light intensity. So you can really customize this Scene Explorer, and then you can use as many Scene Explorers as you want. At the moment I've got two, simply because I opened a new one here, and you'll notice it's called Scene Explorer 2. But what I've done is mapped the H hotkey to Scene Explorer, open last Scene Explorer. So if I hit H, it'll bring up that last Scene Explorer, and if I open up Scene Explorer 1, which is slightly different, I've set it up slightly different to the one I just opened up before, then close it down. If I hit H again, it'll bring up that last Scene Explorer. Now quickly how to do that, we just go into customize user interface, and we're looking for Scene Explorer. It's actually under the heading of Open. So if we go down to O, Open Explorer last used. So look for that, and then once you highlight it, you just type in the hotkey of H. If there's a hotkey already selected there, which I believe there is, I think it was Control Alt O, just highlight it, remove, and then highlight it again, and assign, put H in the hotkey and assign. So now we have that as our hotkey for Open Last Scene Explorer. Very handy. Now one thing you need to do in the Scene Explorer to make life so much easier, I'll just scale this over. In the Select pull down, make sure the Sync selection is ticked. That makes it very powerful, because you can literally leave this open somewhere on your desktop, and by selecting anything in the list, you actually select it in the scene live. So as you can see, I can move around the model, I can select lights, cameras, you name it. I've got all of the filters up here, and it makes it a very powerful tool. So I'll probably be using that throughout this tutorial, just to make selections and isolate things, even freeze things. You'll see here you've got the ability to hide, freeze, make things see-through, cull back faces. So very powerful indeed. So I'll just close that down for now, and we'll move on. So we'll go into a front view, and we're going to just bring up our layer manager, and we're going to hide the body, and we're going to hide the teeth, and we're going to hide the set. So the only thing we need to open is the default, which has our iProxy 2 and iProxy 1. And we're not even going to use both those iProxies. So for now, we're actually going to delete this iProxy 2. We don't need it. And since we know that we've lined this sphere up in the eye socket, we can just go ahead and start modeling. I'm just going to hit Control L just to make sure I've got my default lighting on. And we're right to get started. I'll just go M and just give it a default material, just this first material swatch, and just apply to geometry there. Just makes it a little easier for us to see what we're doing. It doesn't have any specular highlight on it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to select enough segments in our sphere so that it's maintaining a nice smooth circle or spherical shape. Now we can always apply a mesh smooth later on to get even tighter, so be careful not to go too high. But one thing you need to maintain is that there is a row of edges that go right through the middle, and there's another row of edges that go right down the center, and that'll become apparent in just a little while when we start to cut the iris detail in. We're going to sort of select a section, we're going to chop it out, flip it around, and we need to weld the vertices back together, and so the fact that it's uniform in these quadrants is going to make that task far more doable, and it's going to make it work nicely. Okay, so there's our sphere. I've used 48 segments. The radius is relative to the size of the eye socket that you've got, and we're happy with everything that's there. If you're using your own character, then you can adjust these, but just maintain that important point that I made of making sure that these quadrants are uniform. And the first thing we're going to do is add a edit poly, and we're going to go into a polygon selection mode. We're going to select a polygon right in the center here, and we're in a front view, and then we're going to use the, I'm just going to slide this up a little bit, we're going to use the grow. So if we grow, and we grow again, we'll grow one more time and one more time. And now we're just going to use the Alt key just to deselect some of these polygons. Now we're just going to bring up our layer manager, unhide the body, we just want to check the size. And as I suspected, we have gone a little bit too big on that iris size. So we're just going to come down on the size, and we're going to do that by using the shrink button, and that's the size that we're going to go for this character. He's a very cutesy child character, so he's going to have nice big eyes. It's going to bring a lot more cuteness to the character. And we can hide our body again, and just in a front view, what we're going to do is slide this up until we find detach, and we're going to click on the little sub menu detach, and we're going to detach to element. If we go OK to that, now what you'll find we've done there is we've detached that part of the model. It's no longer attached to all the other vertices around it, and it has become an element of its own. So if we use the element sub selection method here, that's one element and that's another element. So with that section still selected, we're just going to go to a left view. We're going to slide in there. We're going to rotate. Just view method is fine, but we're going to switch on the angle snap toggle, and we're going to rotate until, and just down the bottom in the Z, you can see that we're rotating around until we get to 180 degrees. So down here is where you'll see that figure go up. So we've rotated at 180 degrees, and now we're going to just we're in a wireframe mode there now. We're moving it back, and we're going to keep coming in until we can really see that we're lining those two front surfaces up. So get it right in there, and that's going to do nicely. And the next thing we need to do is go into vertice mode and select all of those front vertices. So you'll see there we've got all of the vertices on the front selected, and then we're going to bring up our weld tool. Here it is here, and we're going to bring up the settings menu, and straight away you'll see some anomalies happening around the edge here. Don't panic about that. In fact, it's something that we're sort of looking for, because it's an instant indicator that those vertices that we've selected have in fact been welded, because the other indicator is before the operation there was 1154 verts, and now there's 1130 verts. And if you did your math and you count these up, you'll see that welding operation of these verts here has caused that from happening. Now that's perfect, so we can apply that or go OK. Now to get rid of this anomaly around the edge here, we need to just come up into polygon mode, And what we want to do with the inner polygons selected, we're going to slide all the way down until we get to this polygon smoothing groups, and then we're going to click auto smooth, and straight away, and we just want to make sure that, okay, we didn't have enough on the world, so we're just going to undo that and just come back up into our vertice selection mode, and we'll just use our undo up here just to make sure. You can right click on the undo and we can take the and come all the way down the list if we want to, but we just want to take that world vertex out. Just undo that. Okay, so let's go, we'll make sure we've got them all selected, which we have, and make sure we haven't got any stray verts selected, and we haven't. And what we want to do is use our weld tool again. This time bring it up, and what we're going to do is wind the tolerance up a little bit, the threshold. So we're going to wind that up, not too far. If it starts to do this, then we've gone a little bit too far with it, and that should be fine now. And we'll go OK, and we'll just check this now. We'll go to that. I'm just not sure why it's doing that. Those vertices were definitely in the right place. Let's try this. We're just going to undo, go back to before that world. There we are there. We're going to select and make sure we've got the right selection, which we have. And with that selected, what you'll realize is that we are now looking at the inside of the sphere, or this section of the sphere is the inside of the sphere. So we need to flip the normals. We need to make sure that the normals are readable from the outside here. And the way we do that is select all those polygons and look for the flip and flip it. Okay, so now if we were to render that now, you would be able to see the object as it's supposed to be seen. And now we'll go into a vertex. This should fix the problem that we were experiencing there. We'll go to a left view. We'll make sure we've got the right selection, and that's it there. And now we'll slide up, look for that weld, and bring that up. And I think that's worked fine because we haven't got that pinching happening around here, and it's gone to a lower number now. Before it was 1130, I believe, and now it's 1106, so that should be working fine. Now what we'll do is just fix up that smoothing. You'll see that it's sort of curving over, it's smoothing over, and we're just going to fix that up. So what we're going to do is, as before, we're just going to maintain that inner area there, and we're going to slide down to smoothing groups, and we'll auto smooth that, and that's going to give us our nice crisp edge back. So I'll just do a quick render. You'll see that's working nicely, and it's all one mesh again. Now, just while we've got that selected, let's slide down to just above that mesh smoothing area, polygon smoothing groups, and we're just going to type in here 2, and then we're going to go edit, select invert, which selects all the other polygons except for those, and we're going to type in 1, and that gives us 2 material, basically 2 material IDs for the model. Okay, so at this point what we're going to do is just bring up our material editor, and we're going to very quickly put in a sort of a stand-in material. Now, if you have a piece of geometry that has more than one material that needs to be assigned to it, the best way to do that is to use a sub-multi material type. So I'm just going to select on the standard button here to bring up my material map browser, and I'm just going to select the multi-sub object and go OK. And it'll ask, do you want to keep old material as sub material or discard? In this instance we can just discard it because the material is not important to us. We haven't set anything up. Okay, so we can set the number, and by default the amount is 10 that it gives you, 10 materials in the sub object, but you can have literally as many as you want. I think it goes up to about 99, and then if you use some scripting it can actually go a little even higher. So we can set the material amount to 4 in this instance, and that's going to give us, we'll just click on these little color swatches here. These are stand-in color swatches. They don't really have any bearing in the material, but they're good for visual reference in the viewport. On material 1 we're going to click the color swatch and we're just going to slide it down to a white. Material 2 we're just going to give it a sort of a bluish color. Material 3 we're going to make black, and material 4 we're just going to make a very, very faint sort of light blue, and that's going to be sort of it's going to represent the see-through cornea. And something looks like it may have happened with the mapping, because realistically this inner cornea here should be blue. So we'll just make sure we've applied that to it. Yes, we have. And we'll bring up our sub object. I'll edit, invert that selection to get in the center here, slide back down, and yes, it's not 2. So just type in 2 and enter, and that's given us our cornea area there, and so that's working nicely. So there's our sort of stand-in material. That's going to do for now. It's by no means our complete material. It's just there to give us a visual reference and to make sure that our material mapping and our IDs are working nicely. So we'll just close Material Editor for now. We're going to go back to a front view, and we're going to just go into wireframe mode, and now we're going to create the pupil. And if we go into the Create tab, and we're going to create a shape of circle, and so just draw out a circle from the center here and draw it out, bearing in mind that this outer where the blue meets the white, which is out here, is just, we need to go just before it, just there. Make sure you don't go bigger than that blue area, and that's in a front view. So just to make sure we've got it aligned properly, we're going to click on the Align tool, and we're going to click on the sphere, and we'll make sure X, Y and Z are all selected there. We'll go pivot point is fine, and we'll go OK. And now it's completely aligned with the sphere. We're going to go into a left view, and it's right in the center. We're going to move it forward. We're going to keep moving it forward until it just protrudes through, or just goes, and it's going to be a bit hard to see because we haven't filled it in yet. So let's do that. Go into the modify stack for the circle, and we're going to use a modifier of face extrude. And we're going to put that on there, and straight away our circle now has a surface to it, and it doesn't need any thickness in the amount of the extrusion. It's fine as is. And what we can do is bring up our material editor and just assign that material to it. And straight away, like, it's got a default of 1 in the material ID. When we created the circle, it already had a 1 as its basic material ID. So we're going to force it to have a new one. So bring up the modifiers, and we're going to put material on top of the stack, and we're going to wind it up until we get to 3. And the beauty of doing it this way is that you can move this object in and out in your rig. Once we've got this guy rigged up, we can move this in and out to dilate the pupils, to make the pupils very small
and very large, depending on what the emotion is that we're going for with the character, which is a great asset to sort of have in your rig, and it gives you just a lot more possibilities and a lot more control. If we were to incorporate this black pupil area into this original model, we would have to do that through manipulating the UVW mapping or manipulating the gradient of the material, or there's a number of different choices of how to do it, but you have very little control over how you can actually animate that process, and this I've found is the best way to do it. So let's just leave that pupil somewhere in about that position. And as you saw by the render, we're starting to get something that's representative of where we're heading, and it's looking pretty good. And the next thing we need to do is the cornea, and this is a little bit fiddly, but well worth it. Just go to a front view and bring up your creation panel there, and we're going to create a cornea out of a sphere.